You ever sit at your home screen, maybe it's your console or PC, and you have this huge library of games in front of you? A collection that would have blew your 12-year-old's mind back in the day. I know it would have blew my mind because at any point now, I can choose from hundreds of new games, retro games, and even indie gems. My backlog is something I've given up on completing in my lifetime at this point. And if you're like me, when you sit in front of that home screen, you've experienced that feeling that nothing seems fun to play. No matter how many times you scroll up and down that huge list of games, sometimes for 5, 10, even 15 minutes straight, nothing stands out, nothing seems interesting. Then, when you eventually do force yourself to play a new game, it's like you can't even make it a few hours without getting exhausted. For me, I always end up checking my phone, and next thing I know, I've spent those hours watching random YouTube videos. It's like the only games I seem to stick to are the ones I've already played. Older games I've replayed multiple times, games like Dark Souls, Resident Evil 4, Devil May Cry, and Doom. Newer games, they just aren't as good to me as the classics were. I felt that way about Breath of the Wild. Man, I really loved the classic Zelda dungeon design. It was so good. Even Dark Souls, I want to get into Elden Ring, but that game is massive. Sometimes I just want to boot up Dark Souls, play all the way to Ornstein and Smough using a build I've never tried, and end the game right after. Is everything just different now? I know it's not about time for me because if I like a game enough, I'll beat it even if it takes me months. And I'd like to think the games in my backlog are great. I don't just buy everything that looks cool. I seriously look at games way more critically than I ever did before I decide to spend my hard-earned dollars. And I don't even think older games were definitively better back then. In some ways, yeah, but 2024 had to be one of the better years in gaming history for me. I personally think we're in the golden age of Metroidvanias and Silksong isn't even out yet. But I still can't get over the fact that every time I'm at my home screen, I feel like I'm channel surfing. Remember that word next time you're on Game Pass or scrolling through your backlog because the way we interact with video games before we even decide to boot them up plays a significant role in our enjoyment of them. In recent years, I've found myself enjoying older games and feeling nostalgic for a certain time in my life. Things were a lot more simpler back then, and older games really reflect that simplicity. UIs didn't clutter the screen, there wasn't a bunch of menus to sift through. The only thing that stopped gameplay was typically the pause button. Games didn't have pacing issues either. Even during the early to mid-2000s when games started focusing more on story, a cutscene felt like a transition to the next mission, almost like a loading screen, and gameplay was still king. Now, in a lot of newer games, the story happens so frequently in between gameplay, it feels like it doesn't know whether it wants to be a game or a movie. Whatever happened to those huge set pieces that would happen during gameplay? I'm talking Halo 3 with that massive scarab riding on the back of a mongoose with a rocket launcher. Imagine how dull it would have been if it was just a cutscene. I also can't get over this obsession with realistic graphics. At a certain point, you can only put so many polygons on a character model before you start to see diminishing returns. Ray tracing, lumens, nanites, it's all just a bunch of jargon to me and it doesn't affect my enjoyment of a game. Actually, in most cases, it has a negative effect when it feels like I'm watching a slideshow at times. Most of the time, I play on medium and even low settings because all that stuttering is more immersion breaking than playing the game on ugly settings. Also, is it just me or did early 3D games, I'm talking PS2 and GameCube, I feel like the visuals just popped on the screen more. Even the grays and browns of the Xbox 360 and the flatter lighting, it was more visually appealing to me. I've played newer games on GeForce Now so I could crank them to epic and everything just seemed to blur together with the background. This is the worst when it comes to first-person shooters because I can barely see the enemies on screen. I know I can't be the only one who notices this. Everything just looks so real now that games are starting to look too samey. It's to the point where I'm more impressed when games have worse graphics but a stronger art style. It could just be my taste in games, but I play games to escape from real life, not to persist in it. So with the start and stop gameplay and over-reliance on realism, AAA gaming is becoming about as creative as AI-generated YouTube shorts of teacup puppies. I'm blown away by how real they look, but it doesn't speak to me in the way that something with real passion does. I want something human. Back then, you could pop the disc in and get straight into the game. No 3-hour downloads, no surprise updates, no notifications. You open the game case, see that GameStop receipt tucked inside next to the manual, and you held the disc in your hands. There was a certain charm and sense of intentionality behind choosing to play a game that having a digital library can't replicate. Remember game consoles, MP3 players, cameras? I miss having those single-purpose devices because it meant there wasn't really room for distractions. It just did that one thing it was good at. Now, just your phone can play games, browse the internet, watch TV, engage with social media, take pictures, play music. It's all convenient, sure, but that constant stimulation can be exhausting when you're trying to focus on one single thing. Earlier, I mentioned channel surfing, and that's really what everything is now, channel surfing. Did you type in your search bar and my video happened to rank, or was it just thrown into your recommended while you were scrolling YouTube home? This is the same effect that the gaming backlog kinda has. You're not deliberately choosing to play a game, you're scrolling and waiting for something to catch your eye, so it's no wonder why we can't stand modern gaming. That's why I went through the trouble of spending an entire afternoon one day hiding all the games in my Steam library and only keeping a few visible at a time. So far, I've been able to clear a lot of games from my backlog this way. When I complete a game, I just hide it from my library and make the next game I want to play visible again. I don't think modern gaming sucks. I know we're not getting 20 plus Baldur's Gate 3s and Elden Rings each year, but realistically, I don't want every game to be the game. I want to have that simple little indie game, sometimes as a break in between those massive blockbusters, and 9 times out of 10, I end up enjoying the indie games more anyways. If you give yourself permission to ignore that backlog, replay some of your favorites, and please don't sleep on indie games, I promise gaming is very much alive in 2025. That AAA slop, like the stuff we see from EA and Ubisoft, they're really a fraction of what gaming has to offer, and we're basically kneecapping our experience when we gauge quality on how well a game looks. As much as I'd like to play into my nostalgia and validate people's opinions on why modern gaming sucks, I just can't bring myself to it. There's a lot of aspects of why modern gaming is starting to feel stale. Developers letting Unreal Engine 5 make games for them, the frequency of remakes, remasters, and sequels, the complete disregard for games preservation and the importance of physical media, the fact that games take half a decade or more to produce. I could talk for hours on why gaming sucks now, but it doesn't hold a candle to how good the gaming industry is as a whole these days. We really need to buckle down and vote with our wallets if we want to see this stuff go away. Going back to Ubisoft, look at Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. That game was incredible. It was also an incredible flop. So what kind of message does that send companies like Ubisoft? We can't just refuse to support good games and then get mad when publishers continue to release slop. At least that's how I see it. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments. Do you think gaming sucks now? Did you play a lot of new games last year, or did you kind of mentally check out? Whatever it is, I'd like to hear it. Anyways, thanks for watching. Alright, bye.